Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Steve here at 6 Star Automotive. Today we're going to continue our series on preventive maintenance. Before we do anything, please like, subscribe, and follow me as we talk about coolant. Before we continue, I kind of want to go over why I'm doing preventive maintenance first. I think that preventive maintenance is one of the most important things that we do. The purpose of the preventive maintenance is to, like it says, prevent some of the more immediate and emergency situations that we see that happen with a lot of vehicles. Just like with a lot of things, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and that's what we really want to strive for, is to make sure that you stay on top of these preventive maintenance items so they don't turn into anything serious. So one of the core services we provide here at 6 Star Automotive is what we call the personalized maintenance plan. Along with anything that the tech finds in the digital inspection, anything that you've come in for, we're also going to go over the 7 vital fluids that are inside your vehicle. I'm not going to tell you what they are right now. You're going to have to stay tuned to get the rest of them, but you already know one. The first one is the engine oil, which if you didn't catch that video, it's going to be somewhere in here. And if you did, great. We're on to the second vital fluid today, which is going to be coolant. So some of the common questions I get about coolant is, let's see here. What is the difference between coolant and antifreeze? So it really kind of depends on who you ask. Really, I've looked at a lot of different coolants. I've looked at a lot of different coolant bottles. They'll kind of interchange the language. Some people say that you use antifreeze and mix it with water to make coolant. I think that just kind of makes things too complicated. Antifreeze and coolant are pretty much the same thing. The second question I have here is, how does coolant work in my air conditioning? This is a common misconception. Fair enough, it does say coolant, so you think coolant cools, and it's not that coolant doesn't cool, but it doesn't run at the kind of temperatures that your air conditioning would require. So air conditioning uses Freon, and your cooling system uses coolant. Generally, coolant is going to be around 210 degrees Fahrenheit. That's not going to be enough to keep you cool in the summertime. Third question is my coolant lifetime? So some manufacturers will claim to have a lifetime coolant. I guess that depends on what the term lifetime means. I think the justification is that most people don't keep cars past about 5 years or 100,000 miles. I mean, if you're watching this, you probably do, and if you're one of my customers, that's our plan, is to try and keep it for about 250,000 miles. That's our goal. So they focus on that 5-year, 100,000 mile range. In the late 90s, they came out with a coolant called OAT coolant, or organic acid technology. The idea is that the inorganic additives break down over time, and organic additives supposedly don't break down as quickly. So what does coolant actually do? So the job of coolant is very complex. The first thing that it does is it transfers heat, obviously, coolant. Before we talk about what coolant does, let's talk about what it's made out of. So most coolants have a base of ethylene glycol. Ethylene glycol doesn't really transfer heat very well. So in order to get the coolant to do its job of transferring heat, you have to mix it with water, which is very thermally conductive. Before modern coolants, we used to just use water, but water boiling at 212 degrees Fahrenheit doesn't really give us enough buffer for the kinds of operating temperatures that engines need. So we started using ethylene glycol-based coolants. The issue with just using ethylene glycol is that it doesn't transfer heat. So it's good with not boiling or freezing, but it's not very good with that heat transfer. So needs the water. Another reason why we can't just use straight water is that water itself is highly corrosive. So the second thing that coolant does is prevent corrosion. It does this with a myriad of additives that are designed to prevent that process. The issue with that, though, just like the oil additives, is that those corrosion inhibitors break down over time. They get used up, and then the water becomes acidic, the coolant becomes acidic, and then it becomes corrosive again. So we need to extract that coolant and replace it, just like with the oil, with new additives in order to keep it protecting your vehicle. So another aspect of coolant is that it has to prevent boiling. So ethylene glycol itself boils at about 387 degrees Fahrenheit. A 50-50% mixture of coolant and water boils around 223 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's really close to what we need, but not quite enough. So the really smart people in the past found that if we keep the cooling system under pressure, about 16 psi being that kind of key mark generally speaking, we can get that boiling point up to about 260 degrees Fahrenheit, and that gives us a good buffer zone in the normal operating temperature range that we need. On the opposite end of the spectrum, freezing. we need to prevent freezing as well, where the antifreeze coolant kind of comes in. Ethylene glycol on its own freezes at about 8 degrees Fahrenheit, so that's not really good enough. But interestingly enough, when you mix it with about 50% water, it lowers the freezing point to about negative 49 degrees Fahrenheit. We can actually lower that a little bit more if we adjust the mixture of coolant to water to get it a little bit below that, but the negative 50-ish degree range is usually plenty. So because of the benefits of the increased freeze protection being more if you just add more antifreeze, ethylene glycol, then you would think, why not just run that higher ratio all the time? The problem with that is that in higher temperatures, because the ethylene glycol cannot extract the heat fast enough, you can actually have issues with pre-detonation. So again, that 50-50 mixture is usually pretty good for most climates. So the last attribute of the coolant that I'm going to talk about today is sealing and lubricating. So the O-rings, the hoses, and all the seals that are inside the cooling system actually rely on the additives in the coolant to help keep them conditioned and keep them soft. Over time, they will get hard, they will crack, they will dry out. So replacing the coolant on regular intervals helps revitalize those additives and then keep those rubber components lasting as long as they can. So the coolant is also used to condition and lubricate the seals that are in your water pump. Most water pumps will use two seals. They'll have an inner seal and an outer seal, and then they'll use the leaking of that inner seal by the way of what's called a weep hole. So as the inner seal fails, the coolant will leak into a reservoir inside the pump. It will leak out of that weep hole, and then we will see that while we're doing our inspection. That lets us know that a water pump failure is imminent, and we can let you know so we can catch it before there's any serious problems. So thanks for watching this video. That's it for this time. If you don't know when your coolant was last changed, give us a call and experience the 6-star difference for yourself. Now, again,